My daughter Chloe is 5, and my son Liam is 8. I am a 34-year-old single mother of 2 fantastic children. Though I have worked hard to create a solid, comfortable home for us, life has not always been simple. Marcus, my brother, 37, is married to Amelia. They have 2 children, a 7-year-old girl and a 10-year-old lad. Marcus's life on paper is picture perfect: a 6-figure corporate job, a large suburban house, and a stay-at-home wife apparently in control. Trust me, though, it's not as flawless as it first seems. I have never been close to Marcus. Growing up, he was the golden child, the one that made our parents proud, followed all the rules, and received perfect A's. I was the rebellious one, the child who questioned authority, made mistakes, and, based on my parents' observations, gifted gray hairs. Marcus even back then loved to rub his achievements in my face, just to remind me how simple it was to be perfect. He was the kind of brother who would score an A on a test and make sure to leave it where I would see it. As adults, our friendship didn't substantially change. Marcus had always possessed a superiority complex. Though it's always been subtly expressed criticism of my decisions, he enjoys posing himself as providing useful counsel. He informed me it was a hobby job when I opted to work as a freelance graphic designer, and asked whether I had considered what type of example I would be modeling for my children. Marcus behaved like I would have doomed Liam to a lifetime of bullying when he started dancing instead of soccer, and don't even get me started on the time he inquired if I was saving for therapy, since Chloe's favorite color is black and not pink. That is merely Marcus. Things truly started to deteriorate at the most recent family get-together. This was a backyard barbecue at our parents' house, a rare event where everyone turned up. Running around with their cousins, my children were giggling and thoroughly enjoying themselves. Marcus naturally had to say, though, loud enough for everyone to hear. I laughed it off at the time because I had learned not to let him get under my skin, but I could feel the judgment from Amelia's side-eye as she sat there, probably mentally comparing my parenting to her color-coded chore charts and screen time schedules. She said something about how I let my kids run wild, and how it's no surprise they never listen to anyone. The model of helicopter parents is Marcus and Amelia. Their children cannot eat sugar, stay up past 7:30, or view anything non-educational. Though their children often seem weary, Amelia is constantly sharing Pinterest-worthy photos of their family game evenings or handcrafted scientific projects, like they are growing up in a pressure cooker. Marcus, meanwhile, behaves as though he is a secondary hobby, that of a dad, only stepping in to yell instructions or criticize someone else. He works long hours and spends most of his time at family occasions scrolling on his phone. Second, the CPS Visit and untying the truth. My mother called me, obviously uncomfortable, almost a week after the BBQ. She informed me she had heard from some extended family members that Marcus had been disparaging me somewhat. He reportedly had been telling folks I'm unqualified to be a father since I'm too lenient, and that my unstable lifestyle will damage my children. He even made hints suggesting someone should get child protective services involved before it's too late. I was shocked. One thing is to criticize me to my face. Another is to involve CPS and go behind my back and say things like that. That represents a whole new degree of treachery. A few days later, my worst terror materialized. 2 CPS agents stood there when someone knocked at my home. They claimed to have gotten an anonymous complaint about poor living circumstances and neglect. Though my heart was hammering, I allowed them in. Though thorough, they were courteous and asked questions about everything from my children's sleeping quarters to their nutrition. They even spoke with Chloe and Liam, bless them, who were perplexed, but obliging. About 1 hour later, the employees informed me everything appeared to be in order, and they would be closing the matter. Still, the encounter set me off. I went to face Marcus at the next family gathering. I questioned whether he knew anything about the CPS report, rather than accusing him straightforwardly. It was all I could do not to yell. He grinned and muttered something about how people just want what's best for the kids, and occasionally, it takes an outsider to see the bigger picture. Amelia, of course, stood by her husband, claiming they'd only ever acted out of love because I'm too selfish to put my kids first. That's when I knew I couldn't trust them. My parents were enraged when they learned. They refused to cut ties with Marcus. I began journaling everything, every passive-aggressive remark, every dubious observation on their parenting. At family get-togethers, I began observing their children more closely, since they appeared to recede every time I saw them. Though I had no idea where this was leading, one thing was clear. I would not let Marcus and Amelia get away with this. Not very long after the CPS visit, everything began to fall apart. One evening, as I was reading through my messages, a notification from someone I hadn't spoken to in years flashed on screen. Amelia had been close to an old friend before she married Marcus, but she had drifted apart from. She began by asking whether everything was good, which made me dubious right away. Then she bombshelly revealed that Amelia had been complaining about her marriage on private internet forums. She felt imprisoned and apparently struggled with Marcus's domineering actions. The text said Marcus's demand for control went much beyond the children. He scrutinized every element of their life, including their finances and calendar. Amelia had even said in one post that occasionally she felt like another one of his children rather than his wife. The friend suggested I look at Marcus and Amelia's social media profiles for hints, even though she lacked screenshots. That evening, I descended the rabbit hole. Pics of Marcus's perfect family dominated his social media. Vacation pics, holiday dinners, happy birthday announcements. Still, the more I looked, the more cracks I found. Amelia seemed stressed a lot, and the children hardly ever naturally grinned in the pictures. They seemed to be acting for someone else. Amelia's own narrative included remarks that appeared a little strange as well. She would pen lines like, "Another busy week, but we made it through," or "Always so proud of my family," which seemed like she was attempting to persuade someone, maybe herself, that everything was good. Third, compiling data and acting. The next family get-together was not much better. Another BBQ at our parents' house, and Marcus's kids looked tired. Though it wasn't directed at them, the oldest shuddered every time Marcus raised his voice, while his younger kept yawning. They also were quieter than usual, and seldom interacted with my children. Amelia and I once found ourselves in the kitchen together, and she let slip that her oldest had been struggling in school. Marcus believed therapy was a waste of time, and only tolerated it if the school advised it. They started seeing a therapist for anxiousness. That drew my eye. I made the decision to probe a little further following the barbecue. I contacted a mutual friend employed at the children's school. She said that one of Marcus's children had been experiencing anxiety, and that a teacher had voiced worries about the pressure Marcus's children appeared to be under, without specifics. The teacher also noted the child's frequent tiredness and nervousness, which fit what I had observed at family gatherings. I got in touch with Amelia's old buddy at around this time, who told more alarming tales. Marcus was known to scream at his children when things didn't go as planned, she informed me. Amelia had once told her Marcus's rage worried her, but she felt she couldn't go since she wasn't working and lacked financial independence. Like me, the friend looked sincerely concerned. Marcus continued ratcheting up his assaults, so he must have felt I was paying more attention. I had one glass of wine with dinner at the following family gathering. Given my meager drinking, it was a rare pleasure. Ever the opportunist, Marcus made a joke about my being the family's resident lush, and remarked loudly on how I always have a drink in hand. It was ludicrous, but the way he said it made it sound like I was an alcoholic. I knew it was another attempt to discredit me before the family, not just a jab. I then began looking at custody rules, and what exactly qualifies as emotional abuse or neglect. It was about real concern for my niece and nephew, not about retribution now. I started meticulously documenting everything, every sarcastic remark Marcus made, every observation I made about his children's behavior, and even Amelia's subdued admissions. I started jotting notes from family events and kept copies of screenshots of social media posts. Though I considered reporting Marcus to CPS anonymously, I chose to hold off until I had enough proof. Before I could establish a strong case, I wanted to avoid running the danger of having my report disregarded, or worse, tipping him off. The last straw arrived during still another family reunion. Marcus was in full performance mode, chatting loudly about how his parenting method was the reason his kids were so well-behaved. Then, out of nowhere, he said my kids were probably going to end up in juvie if I didn't parent better. The room fell silent. I glanced across at my parents, obviously uneasy but silent. Later, one of my cousins drew me aside and said she thought Marcus mistreated his children emotionally, but she was reluctant to speak out due to his intimidating nature. Not long after that, Amelia sent me something mysterious. She soon backtracked, stating she shouldn't have said anything, and asked me to ignore the message when I tried to reply. She felt Marcus's behavior was unnecessary. She obviously terrified me. By now, Marcus's hypocrisy was more apparent to me. Though he presented a hands-on dad image, he regularly worked late and left Amelia to take care of things at home. His flawless facade was cracking, and it was impossible to overlook. I realized it was time to act, not to get revenge on Marcus, but rather to shield his children. It became evident to me as I studied that they were the ones in need of assistance. Fourth, confrontation, divorce, and a fresh start. I decided it was time to stop defending and start acting following the previous family get-together, to go over everything, including Marcus's behavior, his CPS stunt, and my worries for Marcus's children. I spoke with a family attorney. The attorney listened intently and gave clear counsel. Record everything and pay close attention to facts rather than emotions. She also informed me that there was no way Marcus's reprisal could compromise my custody of my children as long as I maintained my own parenting spotlessness. As advised, I started contacting friends and relatives who had seen Marcus's tantrums. While some were reluctant to participate, others, my cousin, who had already confided in me, agreed to offer written testimonies. Every story presented a clear picture. Marcus was dismissive of his children's feelings, controlling, and quick to anger. I also got in touch with Amelia's former acquaintance, who showed up with screenshots of her private years ago posts. These postings detailed Marcus's screaming, his unwillingness to compromise on parenting choices, and her growing isolation. The bits were beginning to line up. Then I had a chance to witness things personally. One afternoon, I casually volunteered to assist Amelia with school pickup. She accepted grudgingly, most likely overloaded, and in need of the extra hands. I heard a chat between her oldest child and another student as we waited for the children. The lad reported skipping lunch since Dad said I was getting chubby. My stomach churned. Later, I gently probed Amelia about it, and she revealed that Marcus had been fixated on the children's eating patterns, even going so far as to forbid snacks from the house totally. That brought about the turning moment. I sent CPS an anonymous report with all I had recorded. I stayed especially focused on the children, their nervousness, their seeming tiredness, and the negative pressure Marcus seemed to be applying on them. A few weeks later, Marcus's house was visited unexpectedly by CPS. They arranged a follow-up after noting a great degree of family tension. Even though they did not uncover evidence of physical abuse, Marcus's deliberately chosen image was starting to fall apart. Marcus was incensed when word of the CPS visit returned to him. At a family dinner, he angrily charged me with being behind the report. I denied it, maintained a blank face, and he bolted off. The remainder of the family was left in a tense stillness, but I saw a few of them looking at one another knowingly. Clearly, more people were beginning to see through Marcus's performance. The confrontation seemed to drive Amelia toward her breaking point. She arrived at my house a few days later, clearly traumatized. She freely confessed for the first time how horrible things were at home. Marcus's ranting affected her as well, not only the children. From her housekeeping to her handling of the kids' schedules, he attacked everything she accomplished. She said she had been considering divorcing him, but had no idea where to start. I compiled for her a list of sites including legal aid, financial planning tools, and women's shelters. If she chose to file for divorce, I also urged her to retain her own records, including texts, emails, and anything that would be helpful. Marcus, meanwhile, turned his behavior entirely around. This only made things worse when he pulled his eldest child out of therapy, labeling it a waste of time and arguing that discipline would help to cure their problems. Amelia's former buddy, who kept in touch with me, sent more images of Amelia ranting over Marcus's choices. The texts were negative. Amelia particularly mentioned how Marcus's behavior was harming their children and how helpless she felt to stop it. I also got in touch with the teachers of the children, presenting it as a worried relative trying to make sure the children were all right, without probing too further. I urged them to record any observations of issues. Later on, one instructor stated casually that they had already been noting when the oldest child broke down in class during a group assignment. Marcus's public image began to break during the next family gathering. In front of everyone, he lost control and screamed at his smallest child for spilling a drink. The toddler shrank back, obviously terrified, and the room fell quiet. While my parents stared terrified, nobody else said anything except Amelia, who gently guided the children out of the room. A few family members later came to me privately to admit they were beginning to see what I had been talking about. The tipping point occurred when I discovered Amelia had unintentionally transmitted a voicemail to me during our resource discussion. Marcus chastised her in it for not controlling the kids better, calling her useless, and assigning blame for their school problems. The language was insulting, the tone hostile. It was exactly the kind of proof I required to demonstrate his degree of behavior. I returned to my attorney carrying the voicemail. She guided me in developing a strategy to make sure Amelia and the children could get the assistance they required, while shielding my own children from Marcus's reprisals. It was about responsibility and safety now, not about getting back. And it felt, for the first time, as if Marcus's house of cards was going to fall apart. The narrative then follows Amelia's suing, the custody dispute, and Marcus's ultimate fallout. Tell me whether you wish me to keep rewriting. The next few weeks blurred together. Watching Marcus and Amelia's every action, I felt like a hawk examining their social media posts and reading between the lines of Amelia's well-chosen comments. Though I couldn't get rid of the sense that something was quite wrong, it was taxing. Though it meant going against my brother, my instinct told me those kids were hurting, and I was resolved to help. One afternoon, I ran upon an old high school friend who happened to live down Marcus and Amelia's neighborhood. We started conversing, and I stated casually that lately I hadn't seen their children around. Her expression darkened over, then she continued, "Haven't you heard? There's been some trouble over there." My heart missed a beat. Trouble? What kind of trouble? She hesitated, then spoke in a hushed voice. "Well, I'm not sure of all the specifics, but I have heard whispers about CPS visits, and some people are saying Marcus is harsh on those children." It seemed as though a puzzle piece was fitting. All the minor observations I had, the kids' quiet conduct, Amelia's tight smile, the well-chosen social media posts, made sense suddenly. The perfect parent, Marcus, wasn't quite perfect either. Driven by this fresh data, I made the decision to go more boldly. I made direct contact with Amelia, not with charges, but with an offer of support. "Hey Amelia," I texted, "things have been kind of crazy lately, huh? Just wanted to let you know I'm here if you ever need someone to talk to, or just need a break. No judgment, promise." Though I had no idea what to anticipate, she answered practically right away. "Thank you," she replied back. "Things have been challenging. I value the offer." Though it was a modest aperture, it was sufficient. We began texting more often over the next 2 weeks. At first, it was simply friendly banter about the children, school activities, and recipes. Still, Amelia began to open gradually. She would subtly mention Marcus working late, about feeling overburdened with the children, about how lucky I was to have the freedom to work from home. She texted me one evening and caused my blood to run cold. "Sometimes," she noted, "I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, like one wrong move will set him off." Exactly what she meant, I knew. Marcus's eyes revealed that look, the tense jaw and the hardly held wrath. Right before he would spew a barrage of invective, it was the same expression he used to show me when we were children. "Amelia," I said, "you don't deserve that. Nobody does." After a protracted silence, she typed, "I know, but what can I do? I'm stuck." I realized then I had more to do. This was about safeguarding those children, not only about sibling rivalry now. I began looking for materials for victims of emotional abuse and investigating family law. I even went to a nearby women's shelter to learn more. Though I had no idea what my next action would be, I was resolved to enable Amelia and those children to escape Marcus's influence. The voicemail worked like a key opening a secret door. Hearing Marcus's wrath, his nasty comments ringing in my ears, strengthened my will. This went beyond just control to include emotional and verbal assault. I knew I had to act for those children caught in those poisonous surroundings, in addition to Amelia. I strategized with my attorney. We needed more than simply Amelia's whispered anxieties and observations. We required specific proof, witnesses, or anything the authorities would find unambiguous. It was like building a net, meticulously gathering every thread, knowing that one weak connection may allow Marcus to disappear. I began by contacting my cousin, the one who had shared her worries with me. First apprehensive, she was concerned about upsetting a family dynamic. Her eyes grew startled, though, when I played her the message. She said, "He said that to her?" Softly. "That's horrible." She agreed to submit a statement outlining Marcus's years of behavior that she had seen. I then got in touch with the school counselor for my niece and nephew. I said I was a worried family member who had observed certain behavioral changes in them, Although the counselor was wary, she verified that both kids showed symptoms of tension and anxiety after I detailed some particular events. She pledged to monitor them more closely and record any additional issues. Then arrived a revelation. Recall Amelia's former pal, the one who originally brought me her internet venting alert? She got back to me once more, this time carrying a treasure trove of screenshots. Years of pouring her heart out in those private forums, Amelia had been sharing Marcus's controlling actions, furious outbursts, and contempt for her and the children. It covered the voids in my own observations and offered compelling proof. Every day that passed strengthened the net. I felt like I was at last acting to keep those children safe. I did, however, also understand the hazards. Marcus was not someone you could play about with. Should he discover that I was behind this, his reaction was unknown. One evening my phone rang as I was getting my children ready for bed. It was Amelia. Her voice shook. She said, "He found out," softly, "about the counselor, about the screenshots. He's enraged." I tightened my stomach. What did he say? He accused me of betraying him, of trying to turn everyone against him. He threatened to take the youngsters away from me. I started to get enraged. "He can't do that," I murmured, trying to keep my voice steady. "You haven't done anything wrong." "But he's so strong," she said in tears. "He always gets what he wants." I drew in a long breath. "Not this time," I murmured, more to myself than to her. "Not this time. The stakes have lately been bigger." This was about shielding Amelia and those children from Marcus's fury, not only about compiling facts now. I knew I had to walk gently, but just now I couldn't back off. The struggle was still on. The courtroom seemed weighty, the air charged with conflict. My heart hammering like a drum, I sat in the witness stand. Sharp-eyed in a power suit, Marcus's attorney walked in front of me with a whip-like voice. "Mrs. Walker," she said, "you claim that Mr. Walker, my client, is an unfit parent. Yet, you yourself are a single mother, working from home. Isn't it true that you have a history of unconventional choices?" I looked at her and resisted flinching. "My decisions are mine," I responded coolly. "They have little bearing on my brother's capacity to raise his kids." She persisted, trying to characterize me as erratic, insecure, and jealous. Still, I stood fast and stayed true to the truth. I related the years of subdued digs and undermining remarks, the CPS report, and the dread in her eyes. I talked about the voicemail, my voice quivering with hardly subdued rage. I felt a sense of relief when it was my turn to be questioned by Amelia's attorney. He was a nice man. He helped me walk through my testimony so I could present the facts I had collected, the stories I had heard, and the suffering I had seen. The trial went on for weeks. There were times of uncertainty when I worried about Marcus's appeal and power influencing the judge. Then I would look at Amelia, seated across the courtroom, her shoulders set and her eyes ablaze with a fresh will. And I would recall the kids, their looks a mix of hope and terror. At last the day of the decision arrived. The courtroom was full, the hush nearly intolerable. Reading the decision, the judge, a austere woman with a no-nonsense attitude, saw Amelia should get full custody. Marcus's supervised visits depend on his anger control and parenting training. The room went in a gulp. Looking at Amelia, I saw tears of relief, of victory, of freedom, streaming down her face. All the tension, the anxiety, the sleepless nights, all of which were worth it at that one instant. The aftermath turned into a swirl. Shorn of his ideal facade, Marcus railed against the choice, but his appeals were turned down. His reputation in ruins, he started to live apart from society. Amelia, on the other hand, blooms. She moved into a tiny house with the children, picked a part-time job, and began attending the nearby community college. Released from the pressure cooker of their father's control, the youngsters started to heal. Their fears started to dissipate as they laughed more and played more. For my part, my friendship with Marcus stayed broken. He attempted to atone, to mend fences, but the harm was too great. I could not forget what he had done, that suffering he had caused. I also understood, though, that forgiveness was conceivable in its own right. Months after the dirt had settled, one evening I watched the sunset from my porch. Laughter filled the yard as my children played there. I watched Amelia and her kids strolling hand in hand down the street as they were heading over for supper. I felt calm. We had been through a storm, but on the other side, we had emerged stronger. Though it had been protracted and difficult, the battle had been well worth it. We had revealed the gloom, shielded the innocent, and discovered a road toward recovery. and looking at the children's happy expressions, I realized that hope permeated the future, even if it was yet unknown. We had confronted the shadows and come into the brightness of a fresh morning.